Ruthless Compassion is a podcast that shows you how to become fiercely kind. I'm the host, Dr. Marcia Sirota, and in each episode, I get into it with experts and regular folks about the things that get in the way of what we want. Things like addiction and mental health, isolation and loneliness, difficult family and work relationships, and the importance of self-care. I want to help you overcome the obstacles to living your best life, and I want to inspire you to become a powerful kindness warrior. I want to just make a quick note about the audio quality of this podcast. Frankly, it's not great. We tried, but this time technology got the better of us. Still, Carol has a lot of fantastic things to say, so I really hope you'll bear with us and keep on listening. Thank you. International speaker, personal development trainer, and certified coach, Carol Schulte is on a mission to empower people to live big lives no matter what life throws at them. After all, how many folks can say that they lived in an ashram, shaved their head, or bungee jumped in their birthday suit? Carol holds a BFA in theater performance and an MA in communication and believes that your voice and your story have the power to inspire action and instigate change. Carol is the creator of Spark Your Genius and the initiative Women Living Big, and is committed to helping women get out of their comfort zone so they can excel in their career, start and grow their own businesses, and achieve their potential by taking real action. She has lived, worked, and or volunteered in Thailand, India, Peru, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, the U.S., the U.K., and has visited 30 countries and counting, and brings a unique and global perspective to all she does. Passionate about many things, Carol is also a volunteer bereavement facilitator and camp counselor, marathon runner, and yoga instructor. Welcome, Carol Schulte. Welcome, Carol Schulte, to the Ruthless Compassion Show. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcia. I'm so excited.
I was looking over a little bio that you wrote, and you've done a lot of really exciting things. And I always want to know what people have done in their journey from where they came from to where they are today. Could you share a little bit about your journey with the audience?
For sure. I'll try and make this as short as possible, but basically in undergrad, I went to theater school, and my big dream was to get to Broadway and be on stage. I loved that energy exchange between the audience and whoever was performing, whether or not I was sitting in the audience or on stage myself. And so that was my big goal. And then right after theater school, my mom got sick, and my mom she was my number one fan. I mean, she was at every opening and every closing of every show I ever did, and she believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And so when she got more sick, I eventually moved back home to look after her and felt purpose for the first time in my life. Growing up, I was the biggest people pleaser, Marcia, and I'm sure you've come across that in your practice a lot. I did whatever it took to fit in, to look good, to, get that recognition, that permission, that approval. I had a fear of looking bad. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to please everyone. And she was the one woman who got me. And when I was looking after her, I finally felt like I didn't need to be better. I felt like I didn't feel like I wasn't good enough or wasn't pretty enough or tall enough to land the role or get the gig. Like I was exactly where I needed to be. And then she passed away. And in an instant, I lost my number one fan. I lost my purpose, and I lost me. And so I went on a mad search to find myself, and searching did I do. I went to Thailand, and I volunteered at HIV-positive orphanages for babies and children. And then with Mother Teresa's Missions of Charity in Calcutta, I lived in an ashram for a while, practiced intense yoga and meditation, shaved my head, raised $10,000 for breast cancer. I learned how to ride camels and surfboards in Australia. And then I went to New Zealand, met a man, moved into his van, did apple picking for a year. I mean, I certainly lived my own version of eat, pray, love. And then eventually realized I got to come back. I got to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I did. And then I ended up going back to school. I pursued a master's degree in communication. And my thesis specifically looked at end-of-life discourse, or the lack thereof, that takes place between family members. And what I found is that not only are people scared to talk about death and talk about the end, but of the services and literature that did exist, a lot of it was focused primarily at the individuals facing end of life themselves, which, of course, understandably there needs to be. And there wasn't very much for the family members or the caregivers. And they're the ones that, if they don't have the opportunity to have those difficult final conversations or take care of that unfinished business, then they have a harder time adjusting to life afterwards. So my focus was really trying to get that research out there for those caregivers. And after I defended my thesis, I started presenting at symposiums and conferences, and then realized I don't want to stay in the academic world. I want to have this information trickle down to those who can really benefit. So I became a life coach and got my yoga teacher certification and used, those tools to lead workshops to help people through loss, grief. And then on that journey realized I love this work and not a viable business because I didn't want to take money from people, and it really was part of my own healing journey, and realized that my gift to the world was not helping people at that point where they really need someone to hold space for them. They're not in a position to get excited about what's possible. They need to be exactly where they are. But my whole thing is you got to live big while you still can. And I want to help be the champion that my mom was to me for other women and help them get out of their comfort zone and tackle their bucket list items and live their biggest life right now. So that's where my work is. That's where my commitment is. And I love working with women to get them out of that fear, to get them out of trying to please everybody else and look after everyone else and forget about themselves. I think women need to be on the calendar. Women need to realize that they matter too and that they deserve that life. So that's what I get to do, and I'm very fortunate and I love it.
Well, that's a really amazing story, and it brings up two questions in my mind. The first question is, I'm sure there were some very important life lessons you learned, and I'm very interested to hear if there's any you'd like to share with us. And as well, I was wondering if you had any stories from some of the women that you've worked with that might be inspiring.
Yes, to both. So the lessons that I've gleaned from that experience, one, you can't always choose what happens to you in life, but you can choose how you show up, who you want to be, and what you're going to do about it. And you can choose to live big regardless of what life throws your way. The second is that it's sometimes more brave to show up where you are as who you are when, the people that believe in you aren't necessarily there. So, it took a lot of people say, oh, wow, you've lived in all these different places and you shaved your head and you lived on a train and all these things. That must have taken so much courage. Yes, and less courage than it took for me to actually stay in one place and face life without that one person who was there for me. So, being brave just to be you is huge. And then the third big lesson is you don't necessarily have to make it to Broadway or have exotic adventures on the other side of the world to live big. You can live big right here, right now by being your truest, most authentic self and by facing your fears and taking small steps every day towards creating the life that you really want and deserve.
Those are great lessons for sure.
Yes, thank you. And it's been a long process, a long journey. And I always say we have our whole lives to be a work in progress. So I'm certainly not there. I certainly have fears get in the way. But my big thing is I remember at theater school, one of the lessons that we had to do, or one of the exercises was how can we trigger our emotions by or taking our greatest fear in order to trigger emotions and tears. And mine was always the same. What would I ever do if I ever lost my mom? And that was before she ever even got sick. So if I can live through my greatest fear, why am I going to let these little fears get in the way? Why am I going to let those voices that tell me I'm not good enough, I'm not ready, people aren't going to like me? How is that going to prevent me from going after what I want when I've faced and lived through my greatest fear? So, so that's a big thing. And then in terms of some of the stories of the women that I've worked with, every time I work with somebody, it's inspiring. But I remember one of the early groups that I had, I was working with a woman who had a big dream to sing. And she believed that she couldn't sing because one of her first gigs, she was playing with a band and someone after one of her songs said, oh, that was totally off key. And she interpreted that to mean that she was off key. And so for 30 years, she gave up singing, even though it was her big passion. And after we started working together, I did some, laser coaching, and I said, that's one interpretation of that story. What are some other ways that you could actually have looked at that? And so we went through it, and it was very hard because when you tell yourself this story, especially if you say it over and over, it becomes so true, right? It becomes one of these confabulations, and we make it true in our minds, even though it's not. And so one of the other interpretations we came up with was that maybe it was the band who was off key. Maybe it wasn't her at all. And so she ended up speaking to one of the members of the band shortly after this conversation, and they said, oh yeah, it was totally us. It was not you at all. Meanwhile, for 30 years, she hasn't sung. And so through this work together, I was working with a group, and we had this launch party. It was a Spark Your Genius program that I had, and we launched, and she sang live in front of this group. And it was so amazing, and she was on fire. And since then, she now has a regular singing gig, and she's just happier than she has been in a long time. So things like that are pretty inspiring.
That's an amazing story. And it really speaks to how we can get these thoughts in our head and they can completely control and dominate our lives in a very negative way.
Totally. And we all do it. We're humans, right? All of us have these little gremlins that live inside of our heads that tell us, we can't do it, or we're not smart enough, or we don't sing well enough, or we're not good enough, we're not ready. But they're not true, right? So we can continue to give power to these gremlins, or we can say, thank you very much, and I no longer need you, and, tell them to take a time out in the corner. I sometimes lead workshops where we actually physically create our gremlin, and then we get our core gremlin message out, and then we decide to squash it. And we literally make it out of Play-Doh or plasticine, and then everybody squashes their gremlin and releases it of its power. And it's very profound and very freeing.
Yeah, I call that the inner killer.
It is. It totally is.
Yeah, and I say you got to kill your inner killer. Think of it as a bacteria. If you take an antibiotic for a bacteria, you don't have any problems killing a bacteria. This is something like that too. It's hurting you. You can get rid of it.
I love that. That's a really great analogy.
Yeah. So on that note, this, ideas of inner critics and being able to be our best self. What do you think are the things that really stop us from being our best self and living our best life?
I think one of the big things, especially right now in this generation, or this time rather, is comparison. I think with technology, and I love technology and I embrace social media to a point, and we're so busy comparing our reality to everyone else's highlight reel. And I think we assume far too quickly and far too easily that everybody else has it figured out but us. And I think it's dangerous because we're all on our own path. We all have our own mission, our own purpose. There's this philosophy that I teach called teleology. I don't teach it. It exists. And Aristotle and Plato and ancient philosophers follow this. And it's the idea that we all have this telos, this end, this goal in mind that we need to work towards. But our ability to see our vision clearly, to be able to see where we need to go, is so often blurred because we're so busy comparing ourselves to everyone else around us. And we put everybody else up on pedestals and ourselves down below. And when we do that, we kill our ability to see what we're supposed to do. And we're not able to recognize the gifts that we have to give and how we're supposed to serve. So I think comparison, and especially now with our ability to see everyone's, as I say, highlight reel, right? That term that's out there when everyone's life looks and appears perfect online, and that's not reality. I think that's a big killer.
I agree with you. I think we're all so obsessed with one-upping each other, and it's impossible, right? There's always going to be somebody better, doing more, having more, and it's an endless and futile search, isn't it?
It totally is, and it's so detrimental. And you're right, like there's always going to be somebody ahead of us, and there's always going to be somebody who thinks that we're ahead of them as well. So we have to remember too that we can't compare our middle with somebody else's end. We think, oh, look at this person, look at the success, and we're so quick to assume that it's, this massive overnight success, when really it's sometimes 10, 20 years in the making, and we have no idea what their background story is too. We have no idea if they're actually happy where they are. And I fully agree with you. I think it's very detrimental to do that.
I agree. And other than comparing, do you have any other thoughts about, what might get in the way of us living our best life and being our best self?
I think trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to be something that we're not, trying to live according to other people's values. We're all brought up differently, and based on our parents and our spiritual upbringing and our teachers and, wherever we come from, there are values that are somewhat imposed on us when we're younger. And sometimes we hang on to those values thinking that they're actually who we are, when in fact we have the choice to decide whether or not we still want to hang on to those values or whether or not they're no longer serving us. And I think we subordinate ourselves to so many others that have been influential in our lives and have been our teachers to a certain extent, but just because they believe something doesn't necessarily mean that we have to believe it. So I think the other thing is living according to other people's values instead of our own, and not recognizing what is important to us and what are our own non-negotiables. What do we stand for instead of what are other people telling us that we should really fight for and stand for and believe in.
That's really about being authentic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge. authenticity is and will forever be one of my biggest values. And ironically, it's because I was very inauthentic growing up. You know, I was constantly that girl trying to be what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. I used to go home after high school and try and memorize fashion designers and perfumes and brands, because the cool kids would play this game during lunch where they would choose a category like fashion or perfume or brand designers and see who could one up the other, who knew more, who could outlast the other. And I was useless at that game because I was so not into brands and still not, but I took that to mean that I wasn't cool enough, that I didn't fit in. And so I was constantly trying to be something that I wasn't. So ironically, that, you know, the message that I so want to teach is the message that I also really need to learn myself. And it's constant, you know. I'm certainly in a far better place than I was, but there's still moments where I feel like, oh gosh, you know, do I measure up? Should I be doing this? Is this person going to like me? So yeah, it's interesting.
I agree with you. I think that a lot of us teach what we want to learn, what's interesting and important to us.
Mm-hmm. And I think the universe has a way of reminding us that that's what we need to learn and that's what we want to teach, and that's why we're here. So we're constantly put up with these maybe challenges or opportunities for us to question who we are, what we're doing, because we're meant to do that work.
I agree. So having asked you about what are the obstacles to living your best life and being your best self, what do you think are the things that make it more possible? What kinds of things do we need to do to move in that direction more freely and more purposefully?
Great question. I think one of the big things for me is constantly checking in with yourself and reflecting and asking yourself, what do you really want? You know, where do you see yourself in a few years from now? Where are you now? How can you bridge that gap? You know, really getting clear on where your values are so that you can make sure that you're living in alignment with those. Because I think anytime we feel a little bit unfulfilled or off kilter, it's often because one or more of our values are out of alignment. So I think taking the time to ask ourselves what's really important and what we really want is really big. And I also think surrounding ourselves by supportive, positive people who get us for us and who love us for us. I call it your positive peeps posse. And I think it's really important to make sure that we surround ourselves by people who continue to lift us up.
I totally agree. I was talking to somebody just the other day, and she was telling me how she had kind of eliminated from her life some people who she considered to be toxic. And I was cheering her on. I was saying, yeah, absolutely, because there's no benefit to being around people who bring you down and who don't get you and who don't support you in all of your endeavors.
It's true. And it's so hard to do, especially if these are people that have been in our lives for a long time and we have a lot of history with. We assume that they have to be in our lives. And so kudos to this woman, because I think it takes a lot of courage to recognize, A, that there are toxic relationships in your life, and B, even more courage to be able to somehow, you know, move on or release them from your life. But I think it's so important if you want to step ahead, if you want to get out of your comfort zone, if you want to take steps towards living even bigger, then you have to. Because I think the people who want to keep us where they are, they're scared, right? And anytime you take a big step forward, it challenges themselves to look at their life and say, oh, am I happy? Am I doing what I really want to do? Am I totally fulfilled? So they'd rather just keep everybody else in their comfort zone where they are because it keeps them comfortable. But when other people are ready to step it up, then it's challenging for them. So they want to keep pulling you back, right? It's like the crabs in the bucket story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking a lot about courage. Obviously, that's a very important value for you.
It is, yes. Yes.
Why is that?
Because I think we need courage every day to show up as ourselves. I think it's very much in alignment with being authentic. I think authenticity and courage, for me, go hand in hand, because it does take a lot of courage to be you, to show up, to play full out. And I think life exists at the edge of our comfort zone. You know, I think we can all play safe. We can all live in our comfort zone and live a happy, content life. But I believe where the game of life really gets played is in what Carl Ronke, in his model of the human experience, what he calls the stretch zone, that next zone out, where we really challenge where our edge is, where it's not necessarily a comfortable place, but it's a stimulating one, where creation exists and freedom reigns, and where the game of life really gets played. It's where the magic happens. So I think it takes courage to be able to step out of our comfort zone and take those actions that scare us, but also stretch us.
It's so interesting you say that, because I remember reading something about mastery and how if you want to be a competent piano player, you practice every day for several hours. But if you want to become a masterful piano player, you take on pieces that are harder than you can really do, and you keep plugging away until you're able to play them competently and then well. And that's the only way to achieve greatness. It's to always stretch, as you said, beyond your own level of ability and move into that next level, kind of push yourself into that next level.
Yes. I love that. I'd never heard that before, but I think it's so true. I think a lot of us can be good and comfortable, but you're right. If you don't stretch yourself, you never know where you could get. You know, all of a sudden you reach places you never thought possible. And it does take courage to do that. It's not easy, but it's also far more satisfying and fulfilling when all of a sudden you landed somewhere that you never dreamed possible for yourself.
Mm-hmm. For sure. You were talking earlier about the loss of your mother, which was obviously very devastating. And I agree with you that if you can survive your biggest fear, you can pretty much do anything. But I also sometimes think that these horrible tragedies in our lives are also sometimes opportunities for positive transformation. Do you see any of these kinds of painful experiences in your life or in the life of your clients as sometimes advantages in a sense?
Definitely. And it's hard to talk about it in the form of advantage. And I remember having somebody come up to me after one of my talks saying, you know, I know it was a big loss, but thank goodness you lost your mom. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing this work. And that sounds a bit trite. You know, thank goodness. I mean, I would trade in any one of my experiences if it meant that I could have my mom back, obviously. But I certainly agree with you in that it through loss, you do glean some amazing opportunities. And I have a friend who is writing a book called The Gifts of Grief. And it's all about realizing that through tremendous loss and trauma, there are some gifts that come out. And I've heard a phrase before that says, your mess becomes your message. And I think those who have survived significant loss or tragedy come out transformed and can do some really powerful work as a result. So, you know, advantage, tough word, but yes, I certainly think that what you live through is a catalyst for positive change for yourself and for other people.
And I agree. No one would ever choose to relive these tragedies. They're horrible and you have to really take the loss seriously. But I am always looking at the idea of transformation in terms of being our best self and living our best life and the power of transformation and how you can take the mess and turn it into the message, or you can take the loss and turn it into something that grows you as a person.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm.
So if you had a call to action for the listeners today, what would it be?
It would be to carve out some time on your calendar, 15, 20 minutes, with a blank piece of paper in front of you, and put a circle in the middle of the paper and write out the question, what do I really want? And give yourself the space and the time to brainstorm and to ask yourself, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I want to have? How do I want to feel? What words come to mind? What people do I want to meet? To really brainstorm what's possible for yourself and think bigger than you've ever allowed yourself to think. Don't get caught up in the how I'm going to do it or if it's possible or not. Just give yourself permission to think big and to dream big and to get it out on paper. And no doubt you're going to be more excited than you were when you first sat down thinking about all the things that you really want to create. And what's funny is as soon as we put things down on paper and we get it out, our subconscious mind is already going into solution mode. So it's already thinking about how we can make some of that stuff happen. So, once you figure out the what, you can figure out the how. So just first to allow yourself to think about what it is that you really want and to give yourself permission to carve out that time to think about it in a way that, yeah, I can get this. I can have that life. I do deserve this. And I don't think we take the time to ask ourselves that question enough, and it's so important.
Oh, I love that call to action. I want to do that myself. My goodness. Fantastic.
Good, and you should, and I would love to hear from you what comes out of it.
For sure. Oh, it's going to be huge, for sure. And I also wanted to ask you, speaking of, doing this for yourself, what's coming up for you? What kinds of things are you going to be doing in the next little while? that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, well, I have a few fun events coming up, but one that I'm really excited about is called Bubbles and Bucket Lists. And it's specifically for women who are ready to not only think bigger about what's possible, but actually put them into action. So we get a group of women together and we literally take a glass of bubbly, be it alcoholic or non-alcoholic. We've got both options, and we create our bucket list. So you get a bucket, and I share trigger questions, and we get excited, and I ask you to think about experiences you might want to have or people you might want to meet. We meet fabulous people at our tables, and we literally create our bucket list. And then everybody leaves with at least one thing scheduled on their calendar. And the connections that are made and, figuring out, oh, wow, you want to go skydiving? So do I. It's really inspiring. The energy in the room becomes so heightened. And that's coming up on June 2nd. And I'm so excited about it because I love these events.
That sounds amazing. Where are you holding it?
I'm holding it in downtown Toronto at a place called the Lodge on Queen. It's this really, really cool space. And we rent out the top floor. It's really funky. It's got exposed brick, and it's a really great, conducive space to creativity. And that's where it's going to be.
That sounds wonderful. If people want to find you, where would they find you to look at this event and everything else that you're doing?
They can go to my website, which is carolschulte.com. That's CarolSchulte.com, or womenlivingbig.com. So the information about this event will be on both, or you'll be able to get the tab for this Bubbles and Bucket List event.
That's fantastic, Carol. Is there anything else you'd like to share just before we say goodbye?
I want to say thank you to you. I think you're doing such amazing work, Marcia, and I so appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to staying connected beyond this as well.
That's wonderful. Well, I really appreciate that, and I really enjoy talking with people like you about what they're doing because it's incredibly inspiring, and I'm sure that the listeners feel that way as well.
I hope so. Can I actually give your listeners a gift?
Absolutely.
Because I just finished my first online course, which was a really big, scary thing for me because I did not want to embrace the world of online. But the exercise the call to action that I had people do, thinking about what they really want, is actually part 1 in this course. And I would love to give your audience that course for anybody who's interested to really allow themselves to think bigger. And it's called Make It Happen. So it takes everybody through part 1, thinking about what you want, and then learning goal-setting strategies that actually work, and then you create an action plan to make it happen. So for anyone who's interested, I'm going to give you a link at a later basis so that people can access that if they're interested.
That's fantastic. Absolutely.
Great.
That was the delightful Carol Schulte, and I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota. My apologies again for the terrible sound quality of this Skype interview. Sometimes we don't get lucky with the audio, but hopefully the content will more than make up for it. And if you did like this podcast, please review it on iTunes, and you can also sponsor me on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Marcia Sirota, and you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at marciaSirotaMD.com.